This is KYW-TV, Channel 3 in Philadelphia.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. As our forces fight, they and their families are in our prayers.
This is an Eyewitness News special report. War in the Persian Gulf.
Good evening. I'm Beverly Williams.
And I'm Steve Bell. On this historic night, we're bringing you a number of special reports from the Delaware Valley on Operation Desert Storm, the United States at War. You'll be visiting people's homes to hear their thoughts and emotions. You'll hear from relatives of military personnel in the Persian Gulf, from Arab Americans and American Jews who live in the Delaware Valley, and you'll get reaction from local members of Congress. The U.S. and 24 other nations have been at war with Iraq for approximately 5 hours now, and the war that many feared and many prayed would never happen began with multinational airstrikes against Baghdad and Kuwait. 3 hours after hostilities started, President Bush addressed the American people on TV and radio. He said the world could no longer wait and sanctions alone were not working. The president said Hussein was trying to get nuclear weapons and the world economy also was threatened.
People before that this will not be another Vietnam. And I repeat this here tonight. Our troops will have the best possible support in the entire world, and they will not be asked to fight with one hand tied behind their back. We have no argument with the people of Iraq. Indeed, for the innocents caught in this conflict, I pray for their safety. Our goal is not the conquest of Iraq. It is the liberation of Kuwait.
For the first time in American history, a war was scheduled to start on or near a specific date. First reports that had begun came suddenly on live network television. Because of modern communications, we were able to watch and hear America go to war right on our television sets. The first word came well ahead of the official White House announcement, and it was very dramatic.
It's something after 2:30 in the morning, your time, also in Baghdad.
It was shortly after 6:30 tonight on NBC Nightly News. Tom Brokaw was doing what began as a routine live interview with reporter Mike Betcher. He was at a huge Air Force base in northeastern Saudi Arabia near Iraq and Kuwait.
In about the last 30 to 45 minutes, we've had about at least 20 fighter jets take off with afterburners glowing to destinations we do not know.
A couple of minutes later, NBC's Tom Asbell was reporting live by telephone from a hotel in Baghdad. Then the U.S. air raid began.
Here it goes now. The sky just full of tracer now. And there's a very big explosion right up to the west of the city there. Just winking. Here it comes now, Tom. There's a very big bang right out on the western side of the city. And now guns, there you go. You can hear that, Tom. There are guns, and there's more explosions on the western edge of the city. There's red tracer, white tracer. It's going up all over the place. I haven't seen a missile yet. Another big green flash out towards the airport.
Mike Betcher was on with another live report from Saudi Arabia when air raid sirens sounded.
We're getting our gas masks out just in case. Need to screw the canister on here. We'll just have to wait and see what is to come.
What were you told beforehand about what would happen if you heard air raid sirens in the Dhahran area?
It meant that the city would probably be under attack, that it could be gas, that we should proceed to bomb shelters where we would put on our masks. They would then seal the doors, and we should be in safety there. And that's the procedure. We'll just have to see what happens. We hear some noise right now. We hear a jet engine. The sirens are still going. Let's listen. As many of you folks as you can should head to the shelter now.
Mike, get Arthur Kent to run up to the Joint Information Bureau. Get Arthur Kent to find out. We just lost Saudi Arabia. That's not a an encouraging sign.
Later, NBC showed tape from a photographer who was with Betcher and other reporters as they headed to the air raid shelter. The camera was left running unattended outside to record whatever might happen. Fortunately, no Iraqi or missiles hit the air base. In the Delaware Valley, the start of war has sparked a cry for peace on the streets of Philadelphia. Hundreds of people are attending a candlelight vigil at this hour outside of the Liberty Bell. Channel 3's Paul Moriarty joins us live from Independence Mall. Paul?
Well, Beverly, passionate opinions being expressed throughout the Delaware Valley tonight as America goes to war. Behind me, about 300 protesters, many of them Penn students, have taken over Market Street. They've closed down the street. Police say they'll let them stay here for a while. It is, after all, a very critical evening. One of the protesters is here with me. He's a sophomore from Penn. His name's Chris Lehman. What did you think when you heard the news tonight, Chris?
Well, unfortunately, we knew this was coming. I mean, George Bush has backed us into this situation.
Why do you think he backed us into this situation? You don't agree with him?
Well, he rushed in. He really put his ego on the line. He didn't give the sanctions time to work. He basically committed us to a war.
Do some of the people here feel that they'll end up being drafted?
Obviously, that's a fear of everybody here. That's, you know, we want to stop all the troops. We want to send the troops that are there now. We want to stop future troops from going over there.
Okay, well, for every person that's against this war, there are many people that support the country, as we found out earlier this evening.
Tom, the latest here is that the country has been told to get their gas masks ready.
All eyes were firmly glued to television. Somehow it didn't seem real.
I was really startled. We didn't think it would be this soon.
For those who've been to war and seen the horrors, well, they watched more intently. These men and women sat in silence at the American Legion post in Gloucester Township, New Jersey.
We got to put a stop to it somewhere. We didn't. We let them kick us around in Korea and let them kick us around in Vietnam.
Well, between the tears, I guess I'm sorry it had to come to this, but we stand behind our country.
When I first heard it, I said they have to, really. I mean, because if they don't stop him now, it's going to be too late.
But even in support of our country, there's still fear of the future and Saddam Hussein.
He's a madman.
He's a radical. And if we don't stop him now, down the road, maybe 2 years from now, he might have an atomic bomb. He's going to make it rough for everybody.
I'm nervous. I think everybody's nervous. Yeah, I'm worried.
Back to the street with the 300 demonstrators against the war. Chris, tell me, what do you think ought to be done now? I know you didn't want us to get into it, but we're in it. What do you think the president should do?
Obviously, it's a very delicate situation. The first thing we have to do is stop the fighting. That's the first thing. Second, we've got to explore diplomatic options. We've got to continue to let the sanctions work. We've got to back off and try and, get Saddam Hussein to understand that the world opinion is against him, that the people of the world don't want him in Kuwait. And if we explore those options, I think that we can really have a peaceable solution to this problem.
Okay, Bev and Steve, a very somber and very passionate night throughout the Delaware Valley. Back to you.
Thanks, Paul. This is a long and fearful night, especially for those in the Delaware Valley who have loved ones serving in the Persian Gulf. Channel 3's Malcolm Poindexter visited a woman in Jenkintown tonight, shortly after the fighting began.
Well, did she call? Did she call yet?
Dawn Pinto fought back the tears as she answered the phone.
All right.
Her mother, Mary, is a captain with the 300th Field Hospital and arrived in Saudi Arabia only yesterday. Family members fear for her safety. Fears heightened by word of the air attack on Iraq and Kuwait.
I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and I have all younger sisters and brothers, and they're all crying. They're really, really upset because they don't my younger brother and sister don't understand why this is happening and why their mother has to go over to Saudi Arabia.
Dawn's courage was bolstered by calls from friends and co-workers at Angeloni's Auto Collision Service. On the table in front of her, prayer candles burned all evening, and a yellow ribbon dramatized her prayer for a quick end to hostilities. Still fresh in her mind was seeing her mother off.
They were all in high spirits. They really were. And I think I was more nervous than she was. I really, I was a nervous wreck yesterday. And I didn't even stay to see her off because I just couldn't handle it, really.
For Dawn Pinto and many others like her, it is now a waiting game, waiting to hear that their loved ones are safe and sound. From Jenkintown, Malcolm Poindexter, Channel 3, Eyewitness News Nightcast.
For military personnel stationed here at home, the news hit with a harsh punch of reality. Channel 3's Joyce Evans spoke with young soldiers waiting for flights tonight at Philadelphia's International Airport when word of the attack came.
18-year-old Army Private Michelle Steele sat alone and cried at Philadelphia International tonight. She was one of dozens of soldiers waiting at the USO lounge for flights out to Fort Dix and other military bases. When word came, the war had started.
Scared? Yeah, I was pretty excited past 3 weeks up till now. Scared now. I'm really upset about us actually going. I thought maybe something would happen, we would go to peace, but it didn't work out that way.
I think we should kick Saddam Hussein's ass.
No tears from 17-year-old Army Private Michelle Barnhart. She first heard the news from us. Soldiers filed into and out of the lounge through a steel gate. Orders came tonight from security officials to no longer allow any civilians inside. But through the gate, you could see all eyes and ears were tuned to network news for the latest. The mood, unusually quiet, but ready to take care of business. You worried?
No, not at all.
Ready to go?
Yeah. Who knows what could happen? Only God knows.
At Philadelphia International, Joyce Evans, Eyewitness News, Nightcast.
Saddam Hussein has made no secret of his threats against Israel. If attacked, he vowed, Israel would become his target. But so far, no Iraqi missiles have been fired on Israel, although that country remains on alert. Tonight, Pat Shiraki watched the president's address with two leaders of Philadelphia's Jewish community.
Steve, President Bush is finding support for his military strike with at least two Philadelphia Jewish American leaders. They know that Israel's military is waiting on alert to see what Saddam Hussein does next. But tonight, they are praising the president for his decisive action.
I think the president was open, he was honest, he showed a sensitivity to the downsides of what has happened.
And I think that he deserves a great deal of credit and support from the American public for the bold efforts that he has undertaken to date.
Rabbi David Wortman and Paul Minkoff are with the Jewish Community Relations Council. As they salute the president, they worry about Israel, a threatened target of Saddam Hussein.
Whether or not Saddam Hussein has the capability of responding, he's threatened to attack Israel if he's attacked. So it's still early in the conflict. I don't think anybody can rest comfortably until there is complete cessation of hostilities.
Thousands of miles from here, prayers for peace echoed in Jerusalem early today. The Israeli government closed the schools, imposed a curfew. Tonight they told their citizens to have gas masks at the ready. The Hawk missiles are ready too in case of an Iraqi attack. With tonight's first round of bombings, Minkoff is hoping Iraq missiles are crippled.
I think the technology supports the proposition that they can be removed on surgical strikes. I'm assuming that's what's taking place.
I suspect that until such time as the parties concerned are able to sit down at a table and talk to each other, that Israel will continue to be at risk.
Rabbi David Wortman told me that he believes as long as Israel is not attacked, Israel will stay out of this conflict, letting the international coalition handle Saddam Hussein. Beverly?
Thank you, Pat. Meanwhile, in Washington, there is concern on Capitol Hill. Marge Palla reports that lawmakers are hoping for a quick end to the war with few casualties.
For many here on Capitol Hill, the timing of the attack was a surprise. Several Delaware Valley lawmakers got the word just before leaving to return home. Republican Senator Arlen Specter says he has thought often about his vote on Saturday for war.
It's a very tough proposition to cast the vote, which I did last Saturday, which had a lot of consequences with it.
Republican Congressman Kurt Weldon predicts a quick victory.
I'm scared to death and I'm tense because we have young men and women whose lives are on the line over there. But Saddam Hussein has proven that he doesn't care about human life and he doesn't care about sanctions or the effect on his people or what he's having in terms of an impact on the rest of the world. So unfortunately in this case, I think the only recourse we had was force.
Defense analyst Jeff Record speculates that air power will dominate the first phase of the fighting.
I suspect it will be initially largely an air campaign, very much designed to soften up Iraqi defenses and to cut his lines of communication to and from Kuwait. There has been general talk of even a week or two air bombardment campaign designed to weaken Iraqi defenses and to make the ground attack, if there is going to be one, an easier job.
Democratic Majority Whip Bill Gray was briefed by the president's security advisors moments before his Oval Office address.
Well, it's a very solemn and sad moment. The war that we thought we could avoid is now underway, and our prayers and our thoughts are with those young people who are over there in Saudi Arabia representing the United States who are locked in combat. Our prayers are with their family.
The hope here is for a decisive and for a quick victory. But tonight, our leaders have let the genie out of the bottle, and it remains to be seen whether they know how to get him back in again. On Capitol Hill, Marge Palla, Channel 3, Eyewitness News, Nightcast.
And there are many other families in the Delaware Valley watching tonight with intense interest. Channel 3's Barbara Monaco is live in Delaware County with a family whose Marine Sergeant son is on the front lines. Barbara?
Well, Bev, as you could imagine, tonight may be toughest of all for the families of military men and women who are stationed out on the front lines. And tonight I'm at the home of one such family, Marine Sergeant Michael Burks. And tonight his mom heard what she has both been anticipating and dreading. Speak. She has grave reason to fear. Her son, Marine Sergeant Michael Burke, is an infantryman, and he is on the front line. Burke's family gathered round her, trying to bolster her spirit and theirs. But as the president ended his speech, Alice Burke had to release the tears.
And may he continue to bless our nation.
She told me she's proud of her son and his mission, but that doesn't make this any easier to bear.
When you hear before he did it, it's upsetting. But I know they're there now, but now I'm going to think, I'll constantly listening to when are they moving the ground troops in, because I know he's on the forward line there, and so I know he's going to go. I know he's going to go.
I'm now with Sergeant Burke's brother, Tom, who is also a Marine, and he told me tonight he has just one hope. And what is that?
Well, let's get him in, let's get it done, and let's get him out safely.
Okay, thank you very much. And I know that that is the hope of many people in the Delaware Valley tonight, and we're all hoping it'll be over quickly. Reporting live from Holmes, Pennsylvania, I'm Barbara Monaco. Back to you now in the studio.
Thanks, Barbara. If you're just joining us, here's a look at what's going on over in the Gulf right now. Operation Desert Shield is now called Operation Desert Storm. It began when American air forces launched their attack on all the major Iraqi air and missile bases. Fighter planes Tomahawk missiles were launched from Saudi Arabia, aiming for Iraq's nuclear production facilities, chemical warfare plants, and major airstrips. According to reports from Washington, American pilots also bombed Scud missile bases in western Iraq and radar sites in Kuwait. Those bases are where missiles Saddam Hussein pledged to fire on Israel are based. One U.S. senator said that so far 18,000 tons of bombs have been dropped on Iraq, the equivalent of the bombing of Hiroshima. In the first 3 minutes, one Pentagon source said more bombs dropped on Iraq than Iran dropped on Hussein's forces in 8 years of their bloody war. While we have not seen any pictures of destruction in Baghdad and across Iraq, reports tonight have allowed us to imagine the devastation. One person who can help us understand conditions there is Trudy Rubin, a member of the Philadelphia Inquirer editorial board. She's just back from Baghdad, Iraq. She joins us now from the newsroom. Trudy, the Iraqi people, what was their attitude as the war approached and they had to know of the overwhelming Allied superiority?
I think people were trying to hope and pretend that it wouldn't happen. There was sort of a split mentality. On the one hand, as the days went by, people got increasingly nervous, talked about stockpiling food, talked about wanting to get out of town with their families. On the other hand, they kept saying they trusted in God, and they kept saying, this can't happen, we don't really believe there'll be a war.
All right, what kind of loyalty are we looking at now? You've heard the reports, you know of the devastation, the apparent lack of response so far. How deep is Iraqi loyalty to Saddam Hussein?
I think that the problem is that there are a lot of people, probably I would say even a majority of people, who are deeply unhappy with this policy, but they're not organized in any fashion to do anything about it and would be too afraid to do so. So I think it's more of a passive unhappiness. A lot of it has to do with their sons and husbands and brothers being drafted into the military. Even kids as young as 17 have to go. And many people in their 20s and early 30s have spent up to 10 years in the Army during the 8-year Iran-Iraq War and subsequently, and some of them were just being let out and starting to make their own lives, and now they're being called back in again. So this creates tremendous unhappiness even before the battle started, and I think there'd be a tremendous sense of relief if this thing were over quickly.
Given the U.S. policy of what they call decapitation, trying to take out the leadership, what do you think the Iraqi people will do in response?
I don't think you're going to see any kind of resistance from the Iraqi people. I think that they are so used to being intimidated and threatened and frightened that basically the unhappiness will be kept to themselves and they'll just try to keep their heads down. I think the more interesting question is how well the soldiers will fight in Kuwait if there's a ground war.
All right, why don't you take on that question?
Well, I think that there has been a lot of unhappiness among the ordinary conscripts, in part because of what I just said, that a lot of people are very unhappy about being taken back in. They feel that they fought for years in Iran and there's nothing to show for it. There's a lot of corruption going on in the Army now where wealthier people or those with connections could pay to keep their sons out of the front and have them stationed near Baghdad. So I think you'd have a lot of unhappiness among ordinary soldiers. On the other hand, if they think that Saddam Hussein is going to survive, they might be too frightened to do anything more or less than follow orders. But I don't think they would be fighting, a lot of them, with great enthusiasm. That, of course, doesn't go for everyone.
A final question. Given the lack of response, which I think was totally unexpected by everyone, do you think that Iraqis somehow underestimated, didn't understand what they really were facing?
I think that is true. I don't know whether the top military men understood. I would think they must have done. But the thing that you found constantly was people comparing this to the Iran-Iraq War. People would say, well, we got through the bombing from Iran, so we'll get through this bombing. But I think that what they didn't understand was that the missiles coming in from Iran were tiddlywinks compared with the kind of firepower the Americans were going to drop. I don't think they were able to imagine that.
Trudy Rubin, just back from Baghdad today. Thank you so much for coming in and joining us tonight.
You're welcome, Steve.
At North Catholic High School tonight in the heart of Kensington, an everyday activity was interrupted by the shock of war. Lou Tilley reports on that.
Beverly, it's interesting what Trudy just said. I found to be the same. As I went through my old neighborhood in Frankfurt and Kensington and Port Richmond, the feeling was the same. Throughout Philadelphia tonight, they didn't believe it would actually happen. And in one place in particular, a piece of Americana was going on uninterrupted, even as war was unfolding in the Middle East.
In this tiny gymnasium, they've been fighting these kinds of battles through 2 world wars, Korea and Vietnam. This is North Catholic High School, as mainstream Philadelphia as you can get.
A lot of the guys came in tonight and they knew something was happening. The news was just busting. We told the team that we were at war and that places everything in perspective.
Father Joe Howard, parish priest, teacher, and part-time coach, as intense as his wrestlers are tough.
If I had to go fight for my country, I would. It's one of the most horrible things we have to do is go to war, but if it came my time, I would go, and I would have no problems about it.
They have no fear of the draft. They're very patriotic. They want to fight for their country.
On the mats, the tide began to swing towards north, and thoughts began to drift towards the Middle East.
I don't know, it really pumped me up because I feel them people are going over there to defend me, and I should just give everything my best.
The match ends, but Father Haworth holds the team and the crowd in place and tells them the news he has learned. 2 women slump, and Father Joe offers a prayer.
I'd like the 2 teams to look at each other. Be proud you're an American. Be proud you're a Catholic. Hail Mary, full of grace.
And warriors just moments ago embrace.
On the mats, North Catholic won the key match, and for more reasons than that alone, it was a night I'm sure they will all remember for the rest of their lives. And remember that many of these people that were out there tonight participating are just months away from possibly being called by their countries. And something that Trudy also said reminds me. I'm 35 years old, and I've never really been faced with conflict. I just missed the Vietnam War. We have a whole generation now of Americans that have never really been faced with crisis.
How did those young people react, Lou?
Again, with disbelief. They were not parked in front of their televisions, in front of their radios, and as the news began to circulate through the gymnasium, gymnasium, all the enthusiasm for the wrestling match began to wane just a little bit as the reality began to set in. I'll be back later on in sports. We have another angle on this from Hawk Hill, St. Joseph's University, coming up later in sports.
Thanks, Lou.
Okay, Bev. Steve.
One of the major surprises in the first hours of warfare has been the lack of Iraqi response. There have been real fears that Iraq would launch missile and air attacks against Israel, against Saudi Arabia, even with chemical or biological warheads. But up to now, nothing. I talked tonight with Dr. Daniel Pipes, a Middle East expert at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, and he sees great importance in the lack of Iraqi retaliation.
Well, I think the really important thing is not so much that missiles aren't being directed against Saudi Arabia, but they're not being directed against Israel. Because had they been directed against Israel, the Israelis would then probably have retaliated. That would have brought in the Jordanians, could have brought in the Syrians, and it could have been an all-out Arab-Israeli war. It could have led to the fall of the Jordanian monarchy and possibly even the end of Jordan as a country. There were so many complications, so many dangers there, and those seem to be now averted.
What is your great fear now that the military operation is underway and appears to be off to quite a good start?
My greatest fear is that the Iraqis will collapse so fast and leaving a vacuum so that there might be problems with Iran, with Syria, with Turkey, with the Kurds within, the Shiites within Iraq. There could be civil war, and it might lead to an American occupation, and that is my greatest nightmare.
Did President Bush have any option at this point?
I think not. I think he did the right thing. Basically, I believe it was war now or war later. War against a small bully now or war against a big bully in a few years.
Security is at an all-time high tonight at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. Like military bases around the world, Dover could be the target of terrorist attacks now that the war is underway. Channel 3's Dick Sharon has been on the scene all day in Dover and is live now with reaction to tonight's military attack. Dick?
Well, Beverly, this huge military airlift command base in central Delaware is on condition Bravo, Threatcon Bravo. That means added security. If you want to get through this main gate behind me here, you better have a valid military ID card that's scrutinized very heavily. Security is tight. The base is closed to all but military personnel and civilians with the proper authority to be on there. Now, there is apparently some normal activity going on inside the base. They've been working 12-hour shifts in there. Also activity at a nearby hotel. The lobby of a nearby hotel was filled with military men in transit. In the lounge of the hotel, people were glued to the TV set and liking what they were hearing, including several civilian employees of the Defense Department who may be headed to the Gulf.
I love it. I think it's the greatest thing that we could do. We put Gaddafi at rest when we did our raid on Libya, and what we're doing here, I think it's the greatest thing we could do for world peace.
To me, this reunited my faith in President Bush. And believe me, if that man goes to run again, he's got my vote.
A few feet away, a young Air Force man watched with his mother and sister.
It makes me proud to be an American and to be part of the United States military. George Bush, he's a real man.
A few miles away, up Route 13, a sign outside the Skyline Inn summed up one man's feelings about the situation. Well, in buildings and homes from the spot where I'm standing live a lot of military people, a lot of spouses, a lot of relatives. And for the moment, I haven't talked to many of them, but you get the feeling that there's some very proud people of what the American forces have done so far in this area. That's it live from Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. I'm Dick Sharon. We'll go back to you, Bev and Steve.
All right, thank you, Dick. In Montgomery County tonight, the Naval Air Station at Willow Grove was placed under very tight security. Channel 3's Robin McIntosh was at the front gate when officers and enlisted men and women began reporting for duty.
With the first word of war, dozens of servicemen and women reported for duty at Willow Grove Naval Air Station tonight. From the outside, operations appeared normal, but a closer look revealed security measures that included intensive searches of car and driver. Security is always tight here at Willow Grove, but tonight, security was extra tight. Every car pulling up to the front gate was met by a guard armed with a machine gun.
It's pretty much just checking cars as they go in and checking ID cards to make sure that everybody that's going in has a reason to go in.
Moments after word of Operation Desert Storm, Willow Grove was sealed to outsiders. Only military personnel were allowed in. The mood somber, but at the same time excited. The moment had finally come.
We're all hoping that this thing's over in a hurry and that everybody can go back to operations as normal, and we'll have world peace again.
Operations are proceeding according to plan.
Across Route 611 from the base, the president's address stopped the work at Lee's Hoagie House as customers and employees hung on every word.
I just hope that we win. And I wish a lot of luck to the guys over there.
A lot of them are your customers.
Oh, yeah, lots of them are. I took our hoagies to go.
Some of the customers here, Navy men, under strict orders not to talk to reporters. But others were clearly worried about the days ahead.
I think it's a long road, far further than any of us ever realized.
Tonight, the planes at Willow Grove are standing by, their crews trained and ready, hoping and praying for friends far away. In Montgomery County, I'm Robin McIntosh, Eyewitness News Nightcast.
Word of American action in the Gulf spread quickly, casting a serious tone on entertainment spots throughout the Delaware Valley. At the Schubert Theater in Center City, news came in the middle of a new comedy. And as Trudy Haynes reports, the news had a sobering effect in a night that was supposed to be full of fun.
The house lights had already been lowered at the Schubert Theater for the current comedy hit. Many in the audience did not even know our country was officially at war. Not until intermission, when the management played back an audio tape of the president's early announcement.
Now, the 28 countries with forces in the Gulf area have exhausted all reasonable efforts to reach a peaceful resolution, have no choice but to drive Saddam from Kuwait by force. We will not fail.
A hush came over the audience as it began to realize the urgency and the announcement, our country is at war. During the intermission, we were able to get reaction from some of the theatergoers.
Really, it leaves me numb. On the eve of Martin Luther King's birthday, just seems like such a waste to me. It really does.
I can't even enjoy the show. I'm sitting there thinking about our people's over there, and I'm trying to look at the show, trying to enjoy it at the same time, but it's kind of hard.
Well, it was expected. I mean, everything was pointing toward it. Sorry to hear it, though.
I have nephews, men friends, sons of girlfriends, and I have children that I knew from little all the way up that's going. I feel kind of bad.
They bowed their heads in a moment of silent prayer and then returned to a night of mixed emotions. Trudy Haynes, Channel 3, Eyewitness News, Nightcast.
Tensions in the Gulf made for some very scary and tense moments aboard a TWA jet at the airport tonight. Philadelphia police bomb squad raced to the scene after a bomb scare was called in to TWA. Police say a caller told TWA there was a bomb aboard Flight 756 from New York. Passengers were evacuated. The aircraft then towed to a remote section of the field. A search turned up no explosive, but authorities took no chances.
With the situation the way it is, we gave this a little bit more concern than we might normally. But as far as we can tell, there's no connection between this incident and the things that are occurring now over in the Persian Gulf.
After police searched the plane, passengers reboarded and went on their way to New York.
As air missiles fell on Iraq and Kuwait tonight, the price of oil soared to $40 a barrel. This was the scene of frantic trading on the Chicago Stock Exchange immediately after war in the Persian Gulf began. The price of crude oil climbed about $9 a barrel, but eased back, unable to sustain that high level. On the Philadelphia Stock Exchange tonight, trading is also frantic. The chairman of the exchange says none of the activity is a complete surprise.
Unanticipated for the initial wave of attacks. Tomorrow will bring us new information as to the success or failure of that first wave. That will move the markets again.
Some oil companies responded to the war by immediately freezing the price of gasoline until they can assess the effects of the war. And late this evening, President Bush ordered oil from the nation's strategic stockpile offered for sale on oil markets. That's more than 33 million barrels. President Bush said that he's taking the action to stabilize the world oil market.
It's one of those stories where you say, stay tuned.
Absolutely.
Back to sports. I'm afraid I would imagine this affected almost all the emotions at all the events tonight.
You know, particularly we go back to that wrestling story, the young men and athletes, and at that age, all that emotion, and particularly when it affects them. The story was the same throughout the sports world in many venues tonight, particularly here in the Delaware Valley. Now, the campus at St. Joseph's University has become a focal point of this impending and now developing war, with support, protest, and prayer throughout the past week. Well, tonight, Hawk Hill was alive with basketball as well, and our Michael Barkan was there to track the evening's events.
The crowd was simply unaware tonight, caught up in a Big Five battle between Penn and St. Joe's. The game started at the same time the White House announced Operation Desert Storm. St. Joe's athletic director Don DeJulia kept that fact from the crowd. What would your concerns be at a time like this?
Very distractive, maybe a little bit of panic setting in, so we're slowly going to get the word out personally instead of announcing it all at once.
Little by little, the word was passed. Most were caught unaware. Some were not. Are you aware that we're at war now?
No.
Actually, I'm shocked. I lost a father in Vietnam, and I never thought that I would see a war in my day and age.
Last night, the students and faculty at St. Joe's held a prayer vigil. All prayed for peace. Sadly, those prayers are going unanswered. Scared to death.
I'm scared too. I don't know, you know. You got to do what you got to do. You know, Bush put himself in a corner, and now he's got to get himself out.
Shut us up and join. Game announcer Merrill Reese summed up his job best.
At this moment, our job is just to be here and broadcast the game, and we are just, I guess, diversionary entertainment.
And on a night like tonight, very little at that. I'm Michael Barkan, Channel 3, Eyewitness Sports.
Many have asked this question: if the war continues, what will happen to the Super Bowl, slated for 2 Sundays from now? Well, up to this point, the National Football League says the game will go on. But Tampa Stadium, the site of the game, today the site of safety measures being put in place. A cyclone fence, as you can see, being constructed in the event that the Super Bowl might be a target of terrorist attacks. Beyond that, I can also tell you, I talked with reporters in San Francisco today where they're preparing for the NFC Championship game this Sunday. There is some concern and security measures being put in place in San Francisco as well. Now, some other fallout in the sports world tonight from the night's events. The North Carolina State basketball game, the only one we know of to actually be postponed in respect to the outbreak tonight. The Naval Academy, however, played on and won their game with the University of Richmond, but then they have announced that they are canceling their varsity sports program and schedule until directed to resume by the president. Temple in action tonight. They got their game in Duquesne tonight in Pittsburgh, and a long night for Temple coach John Chaney because he saw his game go into overtime, tied at 54 in Pittsburgh against Duquesne in overtime. Duquesne's James Hargrove will hit the 3. The Dukes took a 57-54 lead, a lead they would hold on to. Temple with a chance at the end to tie it. Closing seconds, Mark Macon missing the free throw. And Temple loses a heartbreaker 60-59. Now back home, as Michael was showing you, at Hawk Hill, John Griffin's St. Joseph's Hawks were taking on the Penn Quakers. And on the break, St. Joe's Bernard Blunt will take it up floor. There he is in front of everybody, all the way for the two-hand jam. St. Joe's hangs on for the win, 87-79. The Hawks have beaten the Quakers 12 straight times. And finally, the Phillies will report to Florida in about a month for baseball. Today, they and the media got together to talk about the upcoming season. As you would expect, all the talk was upbeat and positive. Newcomer Wally Backman drew the most attention. Will be a welcome addition to the 1991 Phillies.
I'm going to do the same things I've always done. I'm going to stay ready to play and try to win a job and try to win it, just not so much just one particular job, but try to win as much playing time as I possibly can, because I really believe that I can be an asset to ball clubs.
Young Mickey Morandini, who finished last season as the starter at second base, is assured that he'll continue to be the starter. I would doubt that as Wally Backman comes in and adds some veteran experience. We'll have to see what happens. So there you have it. I think in the Delaware Valley, as the sports world was affected, in some cases yes, in some cases no. The general opinion that sports should go on, if not just as a diversion and a pleasant one for people. As we talked about before, in World War II, President Delano Roosevelt was actively supportive of sports continuing as a diversion for the
long term. We'll see how the psychology goes if it's a short period
It's
of war.
a stunner for tonight, though. And something else that was a bit of a surprise, lightning and thunder tonight. I guess it goes along with all the other news.
Some people were startled by the lightning and the thunder, but it was just stray thunderstorms, actually, that were moving through the area. And now we're left in some fog around the area and the promise of a glimpse of some sunshine for tomorrow. As we check our high temperature for today, which was well above normal, about 20 degrees above normal for this time of the year. High made it close to the 60-degree mark. Take a look at that. Made it all the way to 58. And the low was 35. Currently, we're at 45 degrees. Humidity still up there, 100%, and that's after some heavy rain in parts of the Delaware Valley tonight, and also some dense fog, especially up over the Lehigh Valley. Barometer on the rise. Westerlies are blowing. That double-barreled low that brought us the rain and thunderstorms is now making its way towards New England, promising to bring some snow to them. Closer look at our live local Channel 3 radar shows you that all that's left of our precipitation are just a few very light scattered showers, some of them in northern New Jersey. So some areas may see a little bit of light drizzle tonight. Otherwise, we're expecting to see some fog around the area. And our satellite map shows you still residual cloudiness hanging back that will move over the area for tomorrow. So clouds, but breaks of sunshine are likely for the day tomorrow. High pressure is next in line, and as that builds in, it will drag in some colder air that will be here by Friday. So we put it together in the forecast, and here's what we're looking at. For tonight, we are expecting to see fog in many areas, patchy fog, and maybe some very light drizzle. Otherwise, breezy conditions from the west, 10 to 20 miles an hour, and a low about 40 degrees. For tomorrow, cloudy skies, but still the promise of a break of sunshine. Breezy conditions, in fact, you may call it windy, from the northwest, 15 to 25 miles an hour, and temperature highs in the mid-40s, still on the mild side, not quite as mild as today, but we could get close to 48 degrees. Looking ahead to our extended 5-day forecast, after a day that will be a mix of clouds and sun for tomorrow, and a high of 47, noticeably cooler, it looks like, by Friday, in the upper 30s under partly sunny skies. Saturday looks fine with sunshine, but then clouds late after a high of 37 degrees, and that brings us to our next chance of rain or snow on Sunday with a high of 40 degrees, and fair and colder weather only in the 20s on Monday. Outside right now under partly cloudy skies, we've got 45 degrees. Thunderstorms have moved through the area, have ended now, and still a chance of a little drizzle and fog in the overnight hours. And tomorrow morning as you head to work, we're looking for variably cloudy skies and a temperature by then about 40 degrees. But certainly tomorrow will look a lot better than today with some sunshine.
Thanks, Linda.
And coverage of the war in the Persian Gulf continues through the night with NBC News. Local coverage resumes with 3 today, tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. Stay tuned to Channel 3 and KYW News Radio 1060 on your dial for the latest developments overseas and